Hi, in this video, we will see how to make a monophonic subtractive synthesizer in Max for Live. Let's begin. Okay, so we start with a blank session and a MIDI track. Let's make a sequence. So double click here on the scene, right? And I'm going to make here like a C major scale or something, just so it sounds good. And double click here to make like a simple sequence, right? Anything will do, to be honest, right? Okay, and click play. Okay, awesome. Now go back to here, okay? And now let's go to Max for Live, Max Instrument, and double click on Max Instrument. You should have this little patch right here, and to open it, you click on the edit button. That should open up Max, okay? And we see this thing right here, right? So the only difference is that now this plug out is our audio output, right? To go to the live track, okay? So I suggest we can delete these, right? That's left and right, audio to live. Sure, we know that, okay? Okay, so we got our plug out, right? Let's start by the cycle test, cycle 440. This is the test you want to do just to verify that your audio works. Awesome. And if you hear a beep, that means we're good to go. Great. Okay, I'm going to multiply this output by 0.5, just so everything gets lowered 6 decibels. You know what? 0.25. That's 12 decibels. Okay, and now to use MIDI here, we need to use notein. And notein will receive MIDI note messages. So the first outlet is pitch, and the second is velocity, and the third is MIDI channel. We don't care for the MIDI channel right now, but let's make some number boxes. And we're going to make integer number boxes. You can make this with the letter I. Here you go. And with the letter C, you can make comments, right? So let's write here, this is velocity, and it goes from 0 to 127. And just to be clear, 0 means note off, and anything from 1 to 127, that means note on. And velocity is the intensity on which you hit the note, right, on your MIDI keyboard. And then here we have the MIDI pitch. The MIDI pitch is sort of tricky because it's like you don't really have any reference. It's their numbers. But here's the main reference. 69 equals A4. And so 70 would be A sharp 4, right? It goes in semitones, right? So if it's 68, that would be G sharp, right? Yeah, that would be G sharp. Awesome. So, okay, to convert this MIDI info into frequency, because we want this to use, we want to use this for our synth, we need to use MIDI to frequency, right? And this converts MIDI to frequency, and let's use F to make a floating point number box, right? We can see that it's a floating point number box because it has a dot on the numbers, right? And we connect this to our cycle sine wave oscillator, okay? And to map the velocity to the amplitude, we just need to divide this by 127, and we make another float number box. And we can see that it doesn't work. Why? Because this 127 doesn't have a dot. It needs a dot to be a float in order to convert and divide properly, right? So if we add a dot, boom, it immediately works, right? Max, what are you gonna do, huh? So then we make a VCA or attenuator or amplifier, which is the multiplication sign. And we use the multiplication results, and we can actually hear the sequence, right? And we can stop the sequence now. Awesome. And what's good about this is that we can actually use our computer keyboard to play melodies. Awesome. But there's an issue here, and that is that if I play, let's say, well, you can actually see this right here. If I play C, and then I play G, and then I stop pressing C, it chokes, right? We're supposed to be hearing G right now, right? So how do we avoid this? Well, we avoid this by using another object that allocates. By the way, I'm using shift arrow keys to move this thing 10 pixels. Control A to move this, to select everything and move everything down, right? Awesome. Okay, so we need to use the ddg.mono object. This is a monophonic synth controller for virtual synths, right? It's what it says. Has two inlets, MIDI note in and velocity in. Awesome. Now we know that we need to connect those two right there. And it has two outputs, MIDI note out and velocity out. Again, it's the same. We really don't need the number boxes in between. They're sending the numbers. We just need to press play, right? Well, we don't hear no difference, but let's do the C-G test. C-G, I stop playing C. Oh, we're still hearing C. I mean G, awesome. And then you can do this effect. Cool, awesome. Now we have a monophonic sine wave synth. Great. But we want this to be a subtractive synth. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to move this over here, and I'm going to replace this for a sawtooth. Awesome. So now we have more harmonics. Sine waves only have one harmonic. Sawtooths have all the harmonic series, right? So if I'm playing 100 hertz, it plays 100, 200, 300, 400 hertz. Great. Now it sounds more like a subtractive synth. But in order to have a subtractive synth, well, we need, well, first we need different waveforms, and then we need the most substantial thing for subtractive synthesis, which is a low pass filter. Okay, so let's start with the oscillators. So let's make different waveforms. One would be triangle using tri, and the other one would be, you guessed it, square wave, and that's rectangle, right? Rect. Awesome. Cool. Now let's make a scope just to troubleshoot here our code, and so that we can see the waveforms. Inspector, go to all, and let's change, oh, I'm blocking this. There we go. Samples per pixel 2, onset delay 100, buffer size 256. Great. Now we can close this, and I can play the sequence. And you can see there that there's the sawtooth, there's the triangle wave, and there's the rectangle. Great. Or the square wave, right? And to select between these three waveforms, we use the selector. We use selector 3. Here we have number of inputs. Well, we have 3 inputs, so we need selector 3. And if we right click help, we can actually see how this thing works, right? So if you send a 0, all inlets are off. We are not listening to anything. If we send a 1, it opens up the first inlet, 2 set the second, and 3 the third, right? Okay. So it should be connected this way according to help. And we should be using that thing, which I don't know how it's called, but an easy way to do it, to know, is to unlock it. Let's open up edit mode, and there it says radio group. So this thing, this GUI right here, is called radio group. So let's make an object that's called radio group. And there we go. But we want 3 options, right? Because we have 3 waveforms. Okay, so let's add here number of items, or it was right there. Number of items, there we go. 3. Okay, awesome. So now we have the 3 waveforms, right? Okay, so I click this, we get nothing. I click the second, we get the sawtooth. And I click the third option and we get the triangle. Why are we not getting the square wave? We're not getting the square wave. So if you see here, when we send a 0, we don't get any waveform, right? At all. So what we need to do is we need to offset by adding 1 so that this thing sends 1, 2, and 3 instead of 0, 1, and 2. That way, when we hit this one, 0 plus 1 is 1. That means we get the sawtooth. 1 plus 1 equals 2. That means we get the triangle wave. And 2 plus 1 equals 3. That means we get the rectangle. Awesome. Now we're getting all the waveforms because we don't want an option that is no waveform, right? That doesn't exist. You need a waveform. Okay, awesome. Now we have that. Let's go on to the next thing, which is the filter. So let's make an SBF. I'm going to have an argument here of 1000 hertz and 0.5 resonance. So resonance goes from 0 to 1, and the cutoff frequency goes, well, it's the audible range, right? From 20 to 20,000, right? We're going to use the low pass output, and let's hit play. Right, and now this is filtering, right? Which is great, but we want this to sound more like bow, 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 right? So how do we do that? Well, we need modulation and we need an envelope. So let's start by making an envelope. This one's easy. We just do ADSR, and let's do the arguments like this: 1 millisecond of attack, 500 milliseconds of decay, 0.5 amplitude, right? Because sustain is an amplitude parameter. It's not a time parameter. And another 500, you know what? 250 for release. And there we go. And now this thing, you know what? Let's change this to 150 for the decay and 150 for the release. There, it's a little bit more plucky, right? But we're going to use that voltage coming out from the envelope that we can see here that it's going up and down and up and down, right? To modulate the cutoff frequency. So a really straightforward way to do this is just to multiply this by 1000 hertz. There we go. Now we get our bam, 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 right? By 2000. Awesome, it works, but why? Right? Because the ADSR goes from 0 to 1, and if we multiply that, again, I showed you this on the frequency modulation video, by 2000, the result is something that goes from 0 to 2000, right? That's the range, right? That's the range, that's not the actual movement, because when you hit the envelope, it goes from 0 to 1 in 1 millisecond, says here, right? The attack. Then it goes to 0.5, that's the sustain, in 150 milliseconds, that's the decay, right? And then when you stop playing the note, it goes to 0 in 150 milliseconds, which is the release, right? So that's how it works. And that's why this thing goes from 0 to 2000 hertz and so, right? But we need this to be more like a conventional synthesizer. Conventional synthesizers don't work like this. They do have a multiplication, but they also have parameters for the filters, right? So we need here again a live dial. We click on this little triangle here, prototypes, frequency. Awesome. And you know what? Let's move this all the way to the left. Shift and arrow keys. There we go. That gives us a bit more space. And I'm using zoom out with control and mouse wheel. It should be command mouse wheel on Mac. Then we make the pack F20 combo right here with the line. Right, this is our cutoff frequency. You know what? I'm gonna rename it here, short name, cutoff. There we go. And I'm gonna make another dial right here. And this is going to be resonance. So let's change the short name for resonance and change this from 0 to 1. Right, so that way it goes from 0 to 1. Oh, you know what? I need to change this. I think it's over here. Unit style. Float. There we go. Nope. Yes. Huh. Weird. It's kind of, well, I guess it's working. Okay, now we connect this over here. And we connect this over here. That's the resonance. Awesome. The cutoff works. That is great, but now we want that modulation from the envelope back, right? So what do? Well, again, we just need a multiplication. We multiply this by a frequency modulation amount, right? So this one would be called, I would just call it envelope amount, right? That goes to the filter. And that's measured in hertz. And that gets added with the cutoff. So the end result, we have two parameters that modulate the cutoff, right? The cutoff and the envelope amount. The difference is that the envelope amount actually provides a movement to the cutoff, and the cutoff is like the starting point, or it's more static, right? Okay, so, well, that's basically it. What can you add? Let's see. Well, you can add more oscillators. You can change the tuning of each oscillator, have a mixer for each oscillator. I would suggest using the gain control right here, which you can just plug here. And this over here. And that way you have like a volume control for your oscillator. And you can have, you know, tons of oscillators, as much as you want. Well, one final thing would be how to make this more presentable, right? So you right click any GUI that you want and you click add to presentation, right? So there you go. This gets added to presentation, add to presentation, and add to presentation, and this one add to presentation. Let's also add a comment here. I'm going to add a comment here that says waveform, and I'm also going to add that to presentation. Okay, then on the lower left corner, you see here like a presentation mode icon. You click on that and voila, you get your controls right there. And now you can just drag them to the top left corner because that's where Max for Live shows your controls. Right, I'm going to move this over here. There we go, waveform. You can actually add more comments here if you want to, like sawtooth, triangle, and square, right? If you want to. And now, to make this appear in Ableton, you just have to right-click any blank space, okay? Click Inspector Window, and you know what? I think this backfired. Let's do it again. Oh, you go to basic, sorry. You go to basic. And then you hit open in presentation. There you go. There we go. And well, you save this. I'm not going to save it, but you should. You know what? I actually need to save it. Let's do it. My synth 2. Okay. And then you can just close Max, and there you go. We have our interface right here on Ableton. And then we can select. Right. There you go. You can add now attack, decay, sustain, release. Again, add a bunch of things as much as you want. And well, I hope you learned something, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.